The massive glass dome of Neo Angeles Spaceport stretched high above the bustling crowds. Ships of all sizes landed and took off every few minutes. Some were sleek passenger cruisers heading to the outer colonies. Others were huge cargo haulers bringing goods from distant worlds. The air hummed with the sound of engines and the chatter of travelers from dozens of different planets. Carlos Martinez wiped sweat from his forehead as he stocked shelves in Stellar Provisions. The small supply store sat near Gate 7, where most of the commercial flights departed. At 22 years old, Carlos had worked here for 3 years. The pay was not great, but it helped him save money for college. He dreamed of studying engineering and maybe working on the big starship someday. The store sold everything space travelers might need. Food packs that lasted for months, emergency oxygen tanks, communication devices, clothing suitable for different planetary climates. Carlos knew every item and its price by heart. He took pride in helping customers find exactly what they needed. The morning had been busy but peaceful. A group of miners heading to the asteroid belt bought protein bars and water recyclers. A family moving to New Terra picked up children's spacesuits. An elderly couple bought medicine for their long journey to visit relatives on Mars colony. Then Richard Hampton walked in. Hampton wore an expensive suit that probably cost more than Carlos made in 6 months. His shoes were real leather, rare and costly in an age where most materials were synthetic. Gold rings covered his fingers. A platinum watch gleamed on his wrist. Everything about him screamed wealth and importance. But his face showed anger and frustration. His jaw was tight. His eyes were hard and cold. He moved through the store like he owned it, pushing past other customers without saying "excuse me." Carlos was arranging some navigation tools on a high shelf when Hampton approached. The counter. He slammed his hand down hard, making the display items jump. "You there," Hampton said, his voice loud and sharp. "I need a full environmental suit, size large, and I need it now." Carlos climbed down from his ladder and walked to the counter, with a friendly smile. "Of course, sir. Let me check what we have in stock." He moved to the computer terminal and began typing. The system showed 3 environmental suits in large size. 2 were basic models. 1 was a premium version with extra features. "We have 3 suits available," Carlos said politely. "The basic model is 800 credits. The deluxe version is 1,200. And we have a premium suit with advanced life support for 2,000 credits." Hampton's face turned red. 2,000 credits? Are you trying to rob me? I can get the same suit on Earth for half that price. Carlos kept his voice calm and professional. "The prices include shipping costs from Earth, sir. Everything here costs more because we're so far from the manufacturing centers. But all our suits meet safety standards for any environment." "I don't care about your excuses," Hampton snapped. "Your prices are ridiculous. What kind of business are you people running here?" Other customers in the store began to look over. An alien family, with blue skin and 4 arms, watched nervously. A human couple near the food section stopped their conversation to listen. Carlos felt uncomfortable but tried to stay helpful. "I understand the prices seem high, sir. If you'd like, I can show you the basic model. It has all the essential features you need." "The basic model?" Hampton's voice got louder. "Do you think I'm some kind of cheap tourist? I'm Richard Hampton. I own 3 shipping companies. I've got more money than you'll see in your whole pathetic life." The words hit Carlos like a slap. His face grew warm with embarrassment. Around the store, conversation stopped. Everyone was watching now. "I didn't mean to offend you, sir," Carlos said quietly. "I was just trying to show you all the options." "Options?" Hampton laughed, but it was not a nice sound. "Let me tell you about options. You people come up here thinking you can charge whatever you want, taking advantage of honest business travelers. It's probably because you can't do any real work." Carlos's hands shook a little, but he kept his voice steady. "Sir, I'm just doing my job. If you don't like our prices, maybe you could try the store on level 3. They might have different options." This made Hampton even angrier. His face turned almost purple. "Don't tell me to go somewhere else. You're probably too lazy to give me proper service. That's the problem with your kind. No work ethic, no pride, Just looking for easy money. The words stung because they were so unfair. Carlos worked hard every day. He was always polite to customers, even the difficult ones. He studied engineering books in his free time, hoping to build a better future. But Hampton saw none of that. He only saw someone to blame for his own problems. "Please, sir," Carlos said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I'm trying to help you. What exactly do you need the suit for? Maybe I can suggest the best option." "What I need it for?" Hampton leaned across the counter, bringing his angry face close to Carlos's. "I need it because I just wasted 2 weeks trying to make a deal with those blue-skinned freaks on Zephyr Prime. They rejected my proposal because they said I didn't understand their culture. Me, I've been doing business longer than you've been alive." Carlos nodded, trying to show he was listening. But Hampton was not looking for understanding, he was looking for someone to hurt. "And now I have to stop at this overpriced tourist trap and deal with people who probably never finished school. Look at you. You're what, 20? 21? Probably. Never been off this station. Probably never accomplished anything in your whole life." The other customers looked away, embarrassed by the scene. But no one said anything. No one wanted to get involved with an angry man in an expensive suit. Carlos felt tears starting in his eyes, but he fought them back. He would not give Hampton the satisfaction of seeing him cry. "I graduated high school with honors, sir. I'm saving money for engineering college." "Engineering?" Hampton laughed again. "You think you're smart enough for engineering? People like you should stick to simple jobs. Stocking shelves, cleaning floors. Leave the thinking to people who actually have brains." Near the back of the store, a man in worn spacer clothes had been looking at some navigation equipment. He was tall and lean with dark hair and quiet eyes. His jacket was old but well maintained. His boots were scuffed from many planetary landings. He had been shopping quietly, not bothering anyone. But now he was listening to every word Hampton said. His jaw tightened, his hands clenched into fists. Something dangerous flickered in his calm eyes. Hampton was still yelling at Carlos, his voice getting louder and meaner with each word. The young man behind the counter stood straight and took it all. Professional to the end, despite the unfair attack on everything he was and hoped to become. The quiet man in the worn spacer jacket began walking toward the counter. His steps were slow and deliberate. Something about the way he moved made the air in the store feel different, heavier, more dangerous. Carlos noticed him coming but did not know what to expect. Hampton was too busy with his cruel speech to pay attention to anything else. The storm was about to break. The quiet man reached the counter just as Hampton was finishing another cruel sentence about Carlos being worthless. The spacer stood calmly beside Hampton, not saying anything at first. Just his presence seemed to change the feeling in the store. Hampton noticed him and turned with an annoyed look. "What do you want? Can't you see I'm busy here?" The man's voice was soft but clear. "I can see exactly what you're doing, and I think you should stop." Hampton looked the stranger up and down. He saw the worn jacket, the old boots, the simple clothes. His lip curled with disgust. "Another nobody trying to tell me what to do. Mind your own business, spacer. Go back to whatever rock you crawled off." "This is my business," the man said. His voice stayed calm, but something in his eyes got harder. "When I see someone being treated unfairly, that becomes my business." Carlos watched the exchange with growing worry. He did not want this kind stranger to get in trouble because of him. "It's okay," he said quietly. "I can handle this." The spacer looked at Carlos with something like respect. "I'm sure you can. You've been handling it very well. But no one should have to handle this kind of treatment." Hampton's face turned red. Again, "Listen here, you space bum. I don't know what backwater planet you're from, but this is none of your concern. I'm a paying customer, and I'll speak to the staff however I want." "No," the stranger said simply. "You won't." Something in those two words made Hampton step back. The spacer had not raised his voice. He had not made any threats. But suddenly Hampton felt like he was standing next to something very dangerous. Around the store, other customers had stopped pretending not to watch. The alien family moved closer, their forearms crossed in what might have been their species' way of showing support. The human couple near the food section turned to face the counter completely. Who do you think you are? Hampton demanded, trying to get his confidence back. Some washed-up pilot who thinks he's tough? I could buy and sell you 10 times over. The stranger reached into his jacket pocket. Hampton flinched, thinking he might pull out a weapon. Instead, the man brought out a worn identification card. He set it gently on the counter where everyone could see it. Carlos looked down at the card and his eyes went wide. The picture showed the same man standing in front of him, but wearing a military uniform covered in medals. The name on the card read Admiral Jake Sullivan, Terran Defense Corps Void Walker Division, but it was the number at the bottom that made Carlos's breath catch. Service number VW001, the first Void Walker ever commissioned. Hampton grabbed the card and stared at it. His face went from red to white in seconds. This has to be fake. You're just some nobody spacer. A new voice came from across the store. That's no fake, friend. Everyone turned to see a large man with scars on his face walking toward them. He wore the leather jacket and armed belt of a mercenary captain. Behind him came 3 other rough-looking people, clearly his crew. Captain Ben Rodriguez, the scarred man said, extending his hand to Jake. I served under you during the Arcturus crisis. You probably don't remember me. I was just a sergeant then. Jake shook his hand with a small smile. Ben Rodriguez, 3rd. Platoon, right? You're the one who held the communications tower for 6 hours against impossible odds. Ben grinned. You do remember. Damn, Admiral. What are you doing on this station? Just passing through, Jake said, and trying to convince this gentleman to treat people with respect. Hampton looked around the store. More people were gathering now. Word was spreading fast through the spaceport that Admiral Jake Sullivan was here. Some people were already taking pictures with their communication devices. I didn't know, Hampton stammered. If I had known who you were, that's exactly the problem, Jake said, his voice still quiet but now carrying the weight of command. You think it matters who I am. It doesn't. What matters is who he is. He pointed to Carlos. A young man working hard to build a better life. A human being who deserves respect regardless of his job or his background. A woman with recording equipment pushed through the crowd. Maya Foster, Galactic News Network. Admiral Sullivan, can you comment on what happened here? Jake looked at the reporter, then at Carlos, then back at Hampton. I can tell you that I've traveled to dozens of worlds. I've worked with aliens from countless species, and everywhere I go, I'm proud to be human. Not because we're the strongest or the smartest, but because we believe every person has value. He turned to face Hampton directly. This young man's brother died defending a human colony from raiders 3 years ago. I signed the order for his posthumous Medal of Honor myself. Carlos works here not because he has no other choice, but because he's paying his own way through life. That takes more courage than most people ever show. Carlos stared at Jake in shock. Nobody was supposed to know about his brother Miguel. The military had told the family it was classified information. Hampton's mouth opened and closed like a fish. Around him, the crowd was growing larger. People were recording everything. His humiliation was being broadcast live across the galaxy. I'm sorry, Hampton said, but his voice was weak and empty. I didn't know about your brother. You shouldn't need to know about his brother, Jake said firmly. You should treat him well because he's a person, because that's what decent people do. Commander Lisa Chen arrived with 2 security officers. She was a no-nonsense woman who had been running spaceport security for 5 years. She took one look at the crowd and the recording equipment and knew this was serious. What's the situation here? She asked. Maya Foster stepped forward with her camera still rolling. Commander, we've just witnessed Admiral Jake Sullivan intervene in what appears to be a case of workplace harassment. Commander Chen's eyes widened when she saw Jake. Like most military officers, she knew his reputation. The man who had prevented a war between humans and the Arcturus Alliance. The leader who had saved millions of lives through diplomacy backed by legendary skill. Admiral Sullivan, she said with respect. Is there anything you need from station security? Jake looked at Carlos, who was still processing everything that had happened. Then he looked at Hampton, who seemed to be shrinking smaller by the minute. I think Mr. Hampton was just leaving. Jake said, after he apologizes properly to Carlos. Hampton looked around at all the cameras and recording devices. He looked at the growing crowd of people, many of whom were now openly glaring at him. He looked at Jake Sullivan, a man whose reputation stretched across known space. "I'm sorry," he said to Carlos. His voice was barely a whisper. "I was wrong. I had no right to speak to you that way." Carlos nodded quietly. Even in this moment of victory, he showed more grace than Hampton had shown all day. Hampton hurried out of the store, pushing through the crowd, but the cameras followed him. His humiliation was already spreading across social media and news networks throughout human space. Jake turned to Carlos with a kind smile. "Are you all right?" Carlos nodded, still overwhelmed. "Thank you, sir. You didn't have to do that." "Yes," Jake said simply. "I did." The crowd began to disperse, but people kept coming up to shake Jake's hand or ask for pictures. Through it all, he remained humble and quiet, just a man who had done what he thought was right. But Carlos knew this was bigger than just one moment in a store. This was the day his life changed forever. Word spread through Neo Angeles Spaceport faster than a ship at warp speed. Within an hour, everyone knew that Admiral Jake Sullivan was at Gate 7. People came from all over the station just to see the legendary hero who had saved humanity from war. Carlos tried to return to his normal work, but customers kept asking him about what happened. Some wanted to shake his hand. Others bought things they did not really need just to support him. A group of off-duty pilots pooled their money and bought the most expensive environmental suit in the store, then donated it to the station's emergency supply closet. Jake had tried to leave quietly, but people kept stopping him. Veterans wanted to thank him for his service. Young people asked for advice about joining the military. Parents brought their children to meet a real hero. Through it all, Jake remained patient and kind. He signed autographs on napkins and data pads. He posed for pictures with families. But Carlos noticed that the Admiral kept looking uncomfortable with all the attention. Maya Foster had been recording everything with her news crew. Her live broadcast was being picked up by networks across human space, and even some alien worlds. The story was simple but powerful, a famous hero defending an ordinary worker against a rich bully. Dr. Alex Morgan arrived at the store around noon. He was a tall, thin man with gray hair and kind eyes. Carlos recognized him as one of the station's xenobiologists, someone who studied alien life forms. "Jake," Dr. Morgan said, pushing through the crowd. "I heard what happened. Are you all right?" Jake smiled at his friend. "I'm fine, Alex. Just did what anyone should do." "Not everyone would have stepped in," Dr. Morgan said, "especially not against someone with Hampton's kind of money and connections." They talked quietly while the crowd continued to grow. Carlos could not hear their conversation, but he could see that Dr. Morgan was worried about something. Commander Chen returned with a full security team. The crowd was getting too big for the small store area. She needed to move people along before someone got hurt in the crush. "Admiral," she said, "would you mind making a brief statement? Maybe that would help disperse the crowd." Jake nodded and stepped up on a small box that Dr. Morgan brought from somewhere. The crowd grew quiet, waiting to hear what the famous Admiral would say. "Thank you all for coming," Jake said, his voice carrying easily through the area. "But I want to be clear about something. I am not the hero in this story. Carlos Martinez is the hero." He pointed to Carlos, who looked shocked to be called a hero. This young man faced unfair treatment with dignity and professionalism. He did not lose his temper. He did not fight back with cruel words. He showed the best of what it means to be human. The crowd turned to look at Carlos, who felt his face turn red with embarrassment. He was not used to being the center of attention. "Carlos works hard every day to build a better future," Jake continued. "His brother Miguel died protecting a colony from raiders. That family has already given more for humanity than most of us ever will. Yet Carlos continues to serve others with a smile and respect." An older woman in the crowd started clapping. Soon everyone was applauding Carlos, who looked like he wanted to hide behind the counter. The man who was here earlier, Mr. Hampton, forgot something important. Jake said when the clapping stopped. He forgot that respect is not something you buy with money. It is something you earn by how you treat others. Carlos has earned more respect in one morning than Hampton has in his whole life. Captain Rodriguez stepped forward from the crowd. Admiral, what about Hampton's business dealings? A lot of us independent traders have heard stories. Jake's expression grew serious. That is not for me to judge. But I will say this. The galaxy is watching how humans treat each other. When we show cruelty and prejudice, it reflects on all of us. When we show kindness and respect, that reflects on all of us too. Dr. Morgan moved closer to Jake. The Zephyrian Trade Council has been monitoring the news feeds, he said quietly. They are very interested in this story. Jake raised an eyebrow. The same council that rejected Hampton's business proposal? The very same, Dr. Morgan confirmed. Ambassador Kyle Torres received a message from them an hour ago. They want to discuss new trade agreements with humanity. They specifically mentioned this incident as proof that humans have strong moral character. Maya Foster caught wind of this conversation and pushed her microphone forward. Dr. Morgan, are you saying that Admiral Sullivan's actions here might affect interstellar trade? Dr. Morgan looked at Jake, who nodded slightly. The Zephyrian Council makes decisions based on more than just profit, Dr. Morgan explained to the crowd. They want to do business with species that share their values of respect and dignity. What happened here today shows them the kind of people humans can be. A young Zephyrian in the crowd stepped forward. His blue skin marked him as one of the few aliens working on the station. My name is Zarthek, he said in accented but clear English. I work as a translator for the council. I was here shopping when the incident occurred. The crowd grew very quiet. Everyone knew that Zephyrians were truth-tellers. Their culture made lying almost impossible for them. I recorded everything, Zarthek continued. The way Mr. Hampton spoke to Carlos Martinez was shameful, but the way Admiral Sullivan and all of you responded gives me hope. I will send a full report to the council tonight. Jake stepped down from the box and walked over to Zarthek. Thank you for witnessing, he said formally, using the traditional Zephyrian greeting. Zarthek's eyes widened with surprise and pleasure. You know our customs, Admiral. This shows great respect for our ways. All thinking beings deserve respect, Jake replied. That is what we were talking about here today. Carlos watched this exchange with growing amazement. A simple incident in his store was turning into something much bigger. He was starting to understand that what happened today might change things. Far beyond Neo Angeles spaceport, Maya Foster was practically vibrating with excitement as she recorded everything. This was turning into the biggest story of her career. A story about human values that was literally changing interstellar relations. In real time, Commander Chen managed to gradually move the crowd away from the store. But people kept coming by all day to buy something from Carlos or just to shake his hand. By evening, the store had made more money than it usually did in a week. As the day wound down, Jake returned to the store one more time. The crowds had finally gone home. Carlos was cleaning up and getting ready to close. How are you holding up? Jake asked. Carlos smiled tiredly. It has been the strangest day of my life, sir. I still cannot believe all this happened because someone was rude to me. It happened because you handled rudeness with grace, Jake corrected. That is not as common as it should be. They stood together in the quiet store surrounded by the everyday items that space travelers needed. Nothing had changed physically, but somehow everything felt different. What happens now? Carlos asked. Jake smiled. Now you go home, get some rest, and come back to work tomorrow. But I have a feeling your life is about to get very interesting. Carlos nodded, not fully understanding what Jake meant. But he trusted. This quiet man who had changed his life with a few simple words about treating people with respect. Outside the store windows, the lights of the spaceport continued to twinkle. Ships came and went, carrying people and cargo to distant worlds. But tonight they also carried news of what had happened at Gate 7. News that would soon reach the farthest corners of human space and beyond. The ripples were just beginning to spread. 3 days after the incident at Stellar Provisions, the galaxy was still talking about what happened at Neo Angeles Spaceport. Maya Foster's news report had been viewed over 50 million times across human space. But more importantly, it had been translated into dozens of alien languages and broadcast on worlds that rarely paid attention to human affairs. Carlos arrived at work on Monday morning to find a crowd of reporters waiting outside the store. He tried to slip in through the back entrance, but they spotted him anyway. Carlos Martinez, how do you feel about becoming famous across the galaxy? What was it like to meet Admiral Sullivan? Do you have any comment on the trade negotiations? Carlos pushed through the crowd politely but firmly. I just want to do my job, he said. Please let me work. Inside the store, his manager, Mrs. Kim, was waiting with a huge smile. She was a middle-aged Korean woman who had run Stellar Provisions for 10 years. Nothing usually excited her, but today she was practically bouncing. Carlos, you will not believe what happened over the weekend, she said, waving a data pad at him. Orders, hundreds of orders. People from all over human space want to buy things from our store. They are calling it the most famous supply shop in the galaxy. Carlos looked at the order list. People were buying everything from emergency rations to luxury items, just to support the store where the famous incident happened. Some orders came with messages. Stand strong, Carlos. You represent the best of humanity. Your brother would be proud. But that is not even the biggest news, Mrs. Kim continued. She pulled up another screen on her datapad. The Zephyrian Trade Council has announced a major deal with the Colonial Trade Federation. They are buying 50 billion credits worth of human goods over the next 5 years. Carlos sat down heavily. 50 billion credits? Because of what happened here? Not just because of it, Mrs. Kim explained. But it was the final piece they needed to see. They have been watching humanity for years, deciding if we are the kind of species they want as long-term partners. What Admiral Sullivan did, and how you handled yourself, convinced them that humans have the right values. The door chimed as someone entered the store. Carlos looked up to see Ambassador Kyle Torres, the human representative to several alien governments. He was a distinguished man in his 50s, wearing the formal robes of his office. Mr. Martinez, Ambassador Torres said, extending his hand. I wanted to thank you personally. Your actions have helped secure one of the most important trade agreements in human history. Carlos shook his hand, still feeling overwhelmed. I did not do anything special, sir. I just tried to stay professional. Exactly, the ambassador said. You showed grace under pressure. You proved that humans can maintain their dignity even when facing unfair treatment. The Zephyrians value that quality above almost anything else. Mrs. Kim brought out chairs, and Ambassador Torres sat down to explain what had been happening behind the scenes. The Zephyrian Trade Council has been debating whether to expand their relationship with humanity for over 2 years, he said. Some members thought we were too aggressive, too focused on profit over principles. Mr. Hampton's behavior during his business meetings did not help our case. Carlos remembered Hampton's angry words about the blue-skinned freaks rejecting his proposal. Now he understood why they had turned him down. But then this incident happened, Torres continued. Zarthek sent a full report to the council, not just about what Mr. Hampton did, but about how everyone else responded. Admiral Sullivan defending you, Captain Rodriguez and his crew supporting the Admiral, the crowd of ordinary people showing respect for dignity over wealth. The ambassador pulled up a holographic display from his communicator. It showed a formal document with elaborate Zephyrian symbols along the borders. This is the trade agreement they signed yesterday, he said. It includes a specific clause about ethical business practices. They want to work only with human companies that treat all people with respect, regardless of their position or background. Carlos stared at the document. They wrote that because of what happened here? They wrote it because you proved it was possible, Torres corrected. You showed them that humans can live up to their highest values even in difficult situations. The door chimed again. This time, a tall figure in flowing robes entered. Carlos recognized the blue skin and 4 arms of a Zephyrian, but this one wore the golden bands of high rank. Elder Kethva, Ambassador Torres said, rising quickly and bowing in the Zephyrian manner. The alien moved gracefully to the counter where Carlos stood. When Zephyrians wanted to show deep respect, they lowered all four of their arms and touched their forehead to their chest. Elder Kethva performed this gesture toward Carlos. "Young Martinez," the elder said in perfect English, "you have honored your species and mine. The Council of Elders wishes to express our gratitude." Carlos did not know how to respond to such formal attention from one of the most important aliens in known space. "Thank you, Elder. I was just doing my job." "Indeed," Kethva said, and something in the alien's voice suggested approval. "This is precisely why we have chosen to expand our partnership with humanity. Your species understands that all work has dignity, and all workers deserve respect." Elder Kethva turned to Ambassador Torres. "The first shipments will begin next month. We are particularly interested in human art, literature, and educational materials. We believe your culture has much to teach the galaxy about treating others with kindness." After the elder left, Ambassador Torres sat back down with Carlos. "There's something else you should know," he said. "This trade deal is just the beginning. 3 other alien governments have reached out to us in the past 2 days. They all mentioned the incident here as evidence that humanity is ready for closer cooperation." Carlos felt dizzy. All this because Admiral Sullivan told a rude man to stop being rude? All this because when it mattered, humans chose to do the right thing, Torres corrected. Admiral Sullivan could have walked away. You could have lost your temper and made things worse. The crowd could have ignored what was happening. Instead, everyone chose to stand up for what was right. Mrs. Kim had been listening to everything, with growing amazement. "What about Mr. Hampton? What happened to him?" Ambassador Torres's expression grew serious. "His reputation is ruined across human space and beyond. 3 of his shipping companies have lost their licenses to operate in Zephyrian territory. His business partners are abandoning him. The Galactic Ethics Council has opened an investigation into his past dealings with alien civilizations." He paused, then continued more gently. "I do not take pleasure in anyone's downfall, but Mr. Hampton's behavior had consequences far beyond this store. His rudeness and prejudice were harming humanity's reputation across the galaxy. In a way, what happened here saved us from much worse problems down the road." Carlos thought about this. He had never imagined that one person's bad behavior could affect entire planets and star systems. But he was learning that in an interconnected galaxy, everything was connected to everything else. "What happens now?" he asked. Ambassador Torres smiled. "Now you continue being yourself. Keep working hard. Keep treating people with respect. Keep showing the galaxy the best of what humanity can be. The rest of us will try to follow your example." As the ambassador prepared to leave, he turned back to Carlos one more time. "Oh, and Carlos? Admiral Sullivan asked me to give you this." He handed over a small package wrapped in simple brown paper. Inside was a data pad containing information about engineering scholarships available through the Terran Defense Corps. The note attached was written in Jake's careful handwriting. "Every hero deserves a chance to build the future. Apply when you are ready. The galaxy needs more people like you." Carlos held the data pad with trembling hands. His dream of becoming an engineer suddenly seemed not just possible, but inevitable. Outside the store windows, ships continued to arrive and depart. But now they carried more than just cargo and passengers. They carried news of a young man who had shown the galaxy what human dignity looked like, and a quiet hero who had made sure that dignity was recognized and rewarded. The ripples were spreading farther than anyone could have imagined. 6 months after the incident at Stellar Provisions, Carlos Martinez stood in front of Terra Prime University, the most famous school in human space. He held his acceptance letter in one hand and a small suitcase in the other. Everything he owned fit in that one bag, but somehow he felt richer than he ever had in his life. The scholarship offer from the Terran Defense Corps had been everything Admiral Sullivan promised and more. Full tuition, housing, and living expenses for a 4-year engineering degree. But more than that, it came with opportunities Carlos had never dreamed possible. Dr. Ryan Blake, the Dean of Engineering, met Carlos at the university entrance. He was a cheerful man with graying hair and oil stains on his lab coat. Mr. Martinez, welcome to Terra Prime. I have been looking forward to meeting you. Carlos shook his hand nervously. Thank you for accepting me, Dr. Blake. I promise I will work hard. I have no doubt about that, Dr. Blake said with a smile. Your test scores were excellent, but that is not why we wanted you here. We wanted you because of who you are, the young man who showed the galaxy what human character looks like. They walked across the beautiful campus together. Students from dozens of worlds studied here, preparing to become the engineers, scientists, and leaders of tomorrow. Carlos saw humans working alongside aliens he had only read about in books. Your first semester will be challenging, Dr. Blake explained. Basic engineering, mathematics, physics, and one special class that I think you will find interesting. What kind of special class? Carlos asked. Interspecies relations and ethics, Dr. Blake said. The Zephyrian Trade Council helped design the curriculum. They want future human engineers to understand how technical decisions affect different cultures and species. Carlos stopped walking. They created a class because of what happened at the spaceport? They created it because they saw what happened when humans make decisions based on respect rather than just profit, Dr. Blake corrected. Your incident showed them that humans can be trusted with responsibilities that affect multiple worlds. They reached the engineering building, a massive structure filled with laboratories and workshops. Through the windows, Carlos could see students working on projects he did not recognize. Some appeared to be designing spacecraft engines. Others worked with materials that seemed to bend light around themselves. There is something else, Dr. Blake said as they entered the building. We have a new program starting this fall, a joint research project with several alien universities. Students will work on engineering problems that affect the entire galaxy. Clean energy for colony worlds, faster communication systems for interstellar trade, medical equipment that works for different species. They stopped in front of a large display showing the program details. Carlos read about opportunities to study on alien worlds, work with the greatest minds from dozens of species, and help solve problems that affected billions of beings. Would you be interested in applying? Dr. Blake asked. Carlos stared at the display, hardly believing what he was reading. You think I am qualified for something like this? Carlos, 3 different alien governments specifically requested that you be allowed to apply, Dr. Blake said gently. They remember what you did. They want to work with humans who understand that engineering is not just about building things. It is about building a better future for everyone. That evening, Carlos called his parents from his new dormitory room. His mother cried when she heard about the opportunities ahead of him. His father, a quiet man who worked in the colony's water treatment plant, spoke with pride about his son following in Miguel's footsteps of serving others. Miguel would be so proud, his mother said through her tears. Both my boys heroes in their own way. Carlos did not feel like a hero. He felt like someone who had been given an incredible gift and was trying to figure out how to deserve it. Week into classes, Carlos received an unexpected visitor. Admiral Jake Sullivan appeared at his dormitory, looking exactly the same as he had at the spaceport. Calm, quiet, and somehow larger than life despite his simple clothes. How are you? Settling in? Jake asked as they walked around the campus. It is amazing, sir, Carlos said. Sometimes I cannot believe this is real. The professors, the other students, the opportunities. All because you stood up for me that day. Jake stopped walking and turned to face Carlos directly. Carlos, I need you to understand something very important. This did not happen because I stood up for you. This happened because of how you handled yourself when someone was treating you badly. They sat down on a bench under a large tree. Students passed by, many recognizing Jake but respecting his privacy. I have been in the military for 25 years, Jake continued. I have seen people face much worse situations than a rude customer. Some people break down. Some people fight back with anger. Some people become bitter and cruel themselves. Carlos listened carefully, sensing that Jake was about to tell him something important. But you stayed professional. You kept your dignity. You did not let Hampton's cruelty turn you into a cruel person. That is much harder than fighting any battle I have ever been in. Jake pulled out a datapad and showed Carlos a news report. The headline read, Galactic Ethics Council establishes new standards for interspecies trade. Read the first paragraph, Jake said. Carlos read aloud. The Council today announced new ethical guidelines for all member species, based on principles demonstrated during the Martinez incident at Neo Angeles Spaceport. All trade partners must now show evidence of fair treatment for workers regardless of social or economic status. Carlos looked up from the data pad in shock. They named it after me? They named it after what you represent, Jake said. The idea that every person deserves respect no matter what job they do or where they come from. That idea is now part of galactic law. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching students from different worlds work together on projects that would have been impossible just a year ago. Admiral, Carlos said finally, what happened to Mr. Hampton? Jake's expression grew thoughtful. He lost most of his business. His reputation never recovered. But 6 months ago, he applied to work for a humanitarian organization that helps refugees from war-torn worlds, starting at the bottom, cleaning shelters and serving food. Carlos was surprised. Really? After everything that happened? Sometimes people can change, Jake said. Losing everything he thought was important made him realize what actually matters. He will probably never be rich or powerful again, but he might become a better person. A young alien student approached their bench hesitantly. She had the silver skin and large eyes of a Centaurian. Excuse me, she said in accented English. Are you Carlos Martinez? Carlos nodded, still not used to being recognized. My name is Ziva, she said. I am studying medical engineering. I wanted to thank you. Because of what you did, my people were invited to join the new research programs. We have knowledge about healing that could help many species, but we were too afraid to share it before. She paused, then continued more quietly. You showed us that humans value all people, not just the powerful ones. That made us brave enough to reach out. After Ziva left, Jake smiled at Carlos. Do you see what I mean? Your moment of grace under pressure gave an entire species the courage to share their gifts with the galaxy. Carlos felt overwhelmed again by the scope of what had grown from one simple incident. I still do not understand how treating someone with respect became such a big deal. Because respect is rare, Jake said simply. Power is common. Money is common. But genuine respect for every person as a fellow thinking being, that is precious. And when people see it, they remember it. They want more of it. They want to be part of it. As the sun set over Terra Prime University, Carlos realized that his education was about much more than learning to be an engineer. He was learning to be the kind of person who could help build a galaxy where everyone was treated with dignity. The ripples from that day at the spaceport were still spreading, and Carlos was just beginning to understand how far they might reach. 2 years later, Carlos Martinez stood on the bridge of the exploration vessel New Frontier, watching a blue and green planet grow larger on the main screen. He wore the uniform of the Galactic Survey Corps, with the gold stripes of a first contact specialist on his sleeves. At 25, he was the youngest person ever to hold that position. Captain Nina Santos watched him study the planet below. She was the experienced explorer who had discovered 3 new star systems and made peaceful contact with 2 previously unknown species. But even she seemed nervous about this mission. What do you think, Carlos? She asked. The long-range scans show a civilization, but we cannot tell how advanced they are. Carlos checked the data on his tablet. The planet below had cities, but no space travel yet. Radio signals suggested they were at roughly the same technological level Earth had been 300 years ago. They are definitely intelligent, Carlos said. And they seem to have multiple cultures living together peacefully. That is a good sign. The New Frontier was humanity's newest exploration ship, designed specifically for peaceful contact with unknown species. Carlos was part of a team of specialists trained in interspecies communication, cultural sensitivity, and ethical first contact procedures. Remember everyone? Captain Santos said to the bridge crew. We follow the Martinez protocols for all contact situations. Carlos still felt strange hearing his name attached to the official procedures for meeting new species. The Galactic Council had developed the protocols based on the principles demonstrated during the famous spaceport incident. Treat everyone with respect. Look for common ground. Show dignity under pressure. Never use power to intimidate those who seem weaker. Dr. Lisa Park, the mission's xenobiologist, looked up from her console. Carlos, we are receiving what looks like a welcome message. The translation computer is working on it now. Carlos moved to the communication station. On the screen, symbols appeared and slowly changed into readable text. Strange sky travelers, we greet you in peace. Are you friends or enemies? How do we respond? Asked Lieutenant Tony Wright, the communications officer. Carlos thought carefully about the question. This was always the most important moment in first contact. How humanity answered would shape the relationship between the species for generations to come. Tell them we are friends, Carlos said. Tell them we come to learn, not to conquer, and ask if we may visit their world as guests, not as rulers. Captain Santos nodded approvingly. The message was sent, and they waited. Within an hour, the Bye reply came back. Friends are always welcome. Land in the green valley below the great mountain. We will meet you there. The landing party consisted of 6 people, with Carlos as the lead diplomat. As their shuttle descended through the alien atmosphere, he thought about how much his life had changed since that day at Stellar Provisions. After graduating from Terra Prime University with highest honors, Carlos had been recruited by the Galactic Survey Corps. His reputation for handling difficult situations with grace and wisdom had spread throughout human space and beyond. The alien government specifically requested him for sensitive first contact missions. The shuttle landed in a field of purple grass beside a crystal-clear river. Waiting for them were 12 beings unlike any Carlos had seen before. They were tall and thin, with silver skin that seemed to shimmer in their sun's light. They had forearms like Zephyrians, but their faces were more human-like, with large eyes that showed intelligence and curiosity. The apparent leader stepped forward and spoke in a musical voice. The translation device rendered his words into English. I am Keeper Veltar of the River Cities. You are the first sky travelers we have seen. Are all your people like you? Carlos bowed in the manner his training had taught him for meeting peaceful species. I am Carlos Martinez, representing the United Worlds of Humanity and our allies. We come in friendship, hoping to learn about your people and share knowledge that might help both our species. Keeper Veltar studied Carlos with those large, intelligent eyes. You speak of learning and sharing, not of taking. This is unusual. Other sky travelers who visited long ago spoke only of what they wanted from us. Dr. Park stepped forward. Other travelers? How long ago? Many generations passed, Veltar replied. They had silver ships and demanded we give them our crystal mines. When we refused, they threatened war. But they left when our people stood together and showed we would not be bullied. Carlos felt a chill. The description sounded like the hegemony, a species that had tried to conquer several worlds before the Galactic Council was formed. What did these travelers look like? Veltar described beings that matched historical records of hegemony soldiers. Carlos realized this peaceful species had already survived one attempt at conquest through unity and courage. Our people learned from that experience, Carlos said carefully. We formed a council with many species to prevent such things from happening again. No one should face threats for refusing to give up what is theirs. The alien leader's expression seemed to brighten. You have alliance with other sky travelers? Different species working together? Captain Santos joined the conversation. Many species. We share knowledge, trade freely, and protect each other from those who would cause harm. No one is forced to join, and everyone is treated with respect. Over the next several hours, Carlos and his team learned about the River Cities civilization. They were farmers and artists who had developed advanced agriculture and beautiful crystal technology. They had no interest in space travel, but were eager to learn about other worlds and cultures. Would you be interested in joining our alliance? Carlos asked as the day grew late. Not as subjects, but as equal partners. You could share your knowledge of crystal growing, and we could teach you about other worlds. Keeper Veltar conferred with the other leaders in their musical language. When they finished, he turned back to Carlos with what might have been a smile. We would like that, he said, but we have one question. How do we know you will treat us fairly? How do we know you will not become like those other sky travelers when you have what you want? Carlos thought about the question seriously. It was the same question every new species asked, and the answer was always the most important part of first contact. Because our alliance is built on a simple idea, Carlos said. Every thinking being deserves respect, regardless of their technology or power. We learned this from our own mistakes and from watching how the best of our people behave when it matters most. He paused, then continued. I can promise you this. If any member of our alliance ever threatens or mistreats your people, the rest of us will stand with you against them. That is what alliance means to us. Keeper Veltar was quiet for a long moment, studying Carlos's face. You believe this deeply, he said finally. We can see it in your eyes. Yes, we would like to learn more about your alliance. That evening, as the New Frontier prepared to leave, Carlos received a message on his personal communicator. It was from Admiral Jake Sullivan, now retired but still keeping track of the exploration missions. Heard about your successful contact with the River Cities people, Jake's message read. Proud of you, Carlos. You are showing the galaxy the best of what humanity can be, one species at a time. Carlos smiled as he typed his reply. Just following the example you set, Admiral. Treating people with respect and seeing what grows from that. As the ship jumped to warp speed, heading back to human space with news of a new ally, Carlos stood at the observation deck watching the stars. Each point of light might be home to thinking beings with their own hopes, fears, and dreams. Somewhere out there, the River Cities people were probably looking up at the same stars, knowing for the first time that they were not alone, that they had friends among the sky travelers, that there were species in the galaxy who valued respect over power. Carlos thought about that day at the spaceport that had started it all. Admiral Sullivan standing up for what was right. The crowd of ordinary people showing that most humans shared those values. The aliens who watched and decided that humanity was worth trusting. All of it had grown from one simple idea. Every person deserves to be treated with dignity, no matter who they are or what job they do. Now that idea was spreading to the stars, one new world at a time. And Carlos Martinez, who had once stocked shelves at a spaceport store, was helping to carry it there. The ripples had become waves, and the waves were becoming the future.